Allow me to describe what it's like to be the kid that gets left behind. My name is Haley, and Monica is my older sister. Since she is 2 years older than I am, at times it seemed as though she was the only child in our family. When Monica acquired a new phone, her old shoes when she outgrew them, or her old laptop when she got a better one, I got whatever she was done with it. Monica got the new items. We weren't particularly impoverished. Simply put, my parents didn't believe I needed additional possessions. The only person who truly saw what was happening was my mom's mother, my grandmother. Her face would get pinched as if she had tasted something nasty after she came over and took one look at me and Monica's hand-me-downs. When my parents weren't around, she would pull me aside and say, "Come here, sweetheart." She always carried an envelope containing cash. "Please get yourself something pleasant, something exclusively yours." Grandma had a lot of stuff. Everyone was aware of that. Although she constantly wore expensive clothes and lived in a large home on the opposite side of town, she was more than simply a money-hungry person. She genuinely gave a damn about me. She would inquire about my school, friends, and interests. Basic questions that parents are expected to ask, but mine never were. I had finished everything by the time I turned 15. I'm over being the family ghost, wearing Monica's cast-offs, and waiting for my parents to notice me. I therefore went and got a job manning the checkout counter at this downtown cafe. Taking orders, operating the register, and wiping tables may not have been glamorous, but I kept every dollar I made. No leftovers, no hand-me-downs, and no waiting for Monica to grow weary of something before I received it. It's funny because I actually came to like it this way after a while. At least I didn't have to feel guilty about using someone else's leftovers when I purchased my own items. It was only Grandma who appeared to understand. Occasionally, she would stop by my workplace, order coffee, and simply sit there, beaming at me as if I were accomplishing something truly remarkable. This grand celebration of Monica's transition into adulthood was planned for her 18th birthday. For the celebration, Mom and Dad went all out. They invited almost all of our relatives, hired caterers, and rented this elegant location downtown. Observing Mom fret over every little detail, I assisted in setting up the decorations that morning. By dusk, the place was crowded with cousins, aunts, uncles, and everyone else you could think of. At her coronation, Monica was swishing around in this pricey new gown, taking congrats like a princess. I tried to blend in with the wallpaper by standing out to the side in my prettiest hand-me-down dress. After dinner, the big time arrived. Dad got up, grinning proudly, and clinked his glass. "Everyone, we have a special announcement to make." Mom came over to him, looking almost radiant. I forced myself not to roll my eyes as she said, "As you all know, Monica has always been an exceptional student, and we're thrilled to announce that she'll be attending Preston University this fall." The room erupted in applause. Preston was one of those fancy private colleges where tuition probably cost more than most people's houses. "We've been saving for this since she was born," Dad added proudly. And while it wasn't easy to afford such a prestigious school, nothing's too good for our girl. That's when Grandma stood up. I knew that look on her face. It was the same one she got whenever she caught Mom or Dad treating me like I was invisible. "Well, that's wonderful news," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "I'm very happy for Monica, but I have to ask, have you set aside the same amount for Haley's college education?" The silence in the room got even heavier. Mom and Dad looked like deer caught in headlights, staring at their shoes. "Oh, well," Mom stammered, her face flushing. "There's still plenty of time before Haley graduates high school." But Grandma wasn't letting it go. "That's not what I asked, Sandra." "Well, to be honest," Mom said, trying to sound casual, Haley isn't really college material. Her grades, she's not like Monica. She'll probably want to keep working at that cafe after graduation anyway. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, but before I could say anything, Grandma was pulling something from her purse. "You mean these grades?" She held up my latest report card, the one I'd shown her last week when I got straight A's, the one you'd know about if you ever bothered to ask your youngest daughter about school. The room was dead silent as she read out my grades, all A's with 1 A+ in chemistry. I watched my parents' faces go from red to white. "We didn't know," Dad muttered. Exactly, Grandma's voice could have cut glass. "You don't know anything about Haley because you're too busy fawning over Monica to notice your other daughter exists." "Mom, please," my mother tried to interrupt. "No, you need to hear this," Grandma continued. "So what's the real reason you haven't saved for Haley's education? And don't lie to me, Sandra. I raised you better than that." My parents exchanged looks, and finally, Dad cracked. We spent all our savings on Monica's tuition." The guests from our relatives made me want to disappear into the floor, but Grandma wasn't done. "So you've left nothing for your younger daughter?" She shook her head in disgust. "Well then, I'll tell you what's going to happen. I will pay for Haley's college education, every penny of it. Because at least one adult in this family needs to treat these girls equally." I sat there, torn between wanting to hug my grandmother and wanting to run away from this whole mess. Monica was staring at her cake like it held the secrets of the universe, and my parents looked like they wished the ground would swallow them whole. After Monica's birthday party blew up, our house turned into an ice palace. Mom and Dad acted like I'd personally orchestrated the whole scene, like I'd somehow manipulated Grandma into exposing their favoritism. Monica packed up and left for Preston University that fall, taking with her all the warmth and conversation in our house. My parents walked around like ghosts, barely acknowledging my existence. Sometimes I'd catch them looking at me with this mixture of resentment and embarrassment, like I was the physical embodiment of their public humiliation. I kept working at the cafe, kept getting good grades, kept existing in that empty house. 2 years crawled by like this. When I graduated high school, I got accepted to State University. It wasn't Preston, but it was a good school, and more importantly, it was my ticket out. Grandma beamed with pride when I showed her my acceptance letter. My parents attended my graduation ceremony, but they might as well have been strangers. They didn't take any pictures, didn't throw a party, just handed me a card with a generic congratulations, and went back to talking about how Monica was conquering Preston College. State University became my escape. I lived in the dorms during the semester and stayed with Grandma during breaks. Sure, I'd stop by my parents' house occasionally, usually for an hour or two, just to keep up appearances. These visits always followed the same script. I'd sit in the living room, and Mom and Dad would talk endlessly about Monica. How she had just graduated from Preston with honors and landed this amazing job at some prestigious firm. How she'd met this wonderful guy named Brad who worked in finance. How they were probably getting engaged soon. I just nod and smile, letting their words wash over me like background noise. What could I say? That I was doing well in my classes too. That I'd made the dean's list. That I had my own dreams and achievements. They'd never asked before, why would they start now? And Brad is just perfect for her, Dad would chime in. His family owns that big real estate company downtown. They're really going places together. More nodding from me. More silent smiling. It was easier this way. Let them live in their Monica-centered universe while I built my own life quietly in the background. Sometimes during these visits, I'd catch Grandma watching me with a knowing look. She understood why I stayed quiet, why I just let them ramble about Monica. Fighting for their attention had stopped being worth it a long time ago. "How are your classes really going?" She'd ask later when we were back at her house, and I'd tell her everything about my professors, my projects, my dreams for the future. She'd listen with genuine interest, asking questions, offering advice. After graduating from State University, I landed a great job at a marketing firm. Finally, all those years of hard work were paying off. I had my own apartment, a good salary, and best of all, complete independence from my parents. Life was going pretty well. Then came Monica's wedding. My parents outdid themselves, throwing this massive celebration that looked like something out of a bridal magazine. The venue was this historic mansion with perfectly manicured gardens. There was a string quartet for the ceremony, and the reception had everything from a gourmet, 5-course dinner to an ice sculpture. I later found out they'd taken out a $200,000 loan to pay for it all. I kept my mouth shut about that. It wasn't my business how they spent their money. I just showed up, smiled for the pictures, and genuinely felt happy for my sister. Monica looked beautiful, and her new husband, Brad, seemed like a nice guy. 2 years later, it was my turn. James, my boyfriend and friend of 3 years, proposed, and I was over the moon. We threw a small engagement party at my favorite restaurant. Nothing fancy, just close friends, family, and of course, Grandma. Everything was going great until Grandma stood up to make a toast. I should have known something was coming. She had that look in her eye, the same one from Monica's 18th birthday party. I'd like to say something to the happy couple, she began, but then turned to face my parents. "Sandra, Richard, you did such a wonderful job with Monica's wedding. It was absolutely beautiful. I'm sure you're planning something equally spectacular for Haley's big day." The room got quiet. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but under Grandma's steady gaze, they had no choice but to respond. "Of course," Mom said, forcing a smile. "We want both our daughters to have beautiful weddings." I tried to change the subject, but the damage was done. A few days later, Mom called me. "Haley, come over for dinner. We need to discuss wedding plans." I went, already dreading whatever was coming. James offered to come with me, but I told him I needed to handle this alone. So Mom said after we sat down at the dining room table, "Tell me what you're thinking for the wedding." Well, I started carefully. James and I want something small and intimate. Just close family and friends, maybe 50 people max. I've actually worked out a budget already. We can do everything we want for about $25,000. We've been saving up. $25,000. Mom interrupted, looking horrified. "Absolutely not. That's not acceptable at all. We'll pay for the wedding just like. We did it for Monica's. Don't worry about the cost. Pick whatever you like." I sat there stunned. After years of hand-me-downs and being the family afterthought, my mother was suddenly insisting on throwing me an extravagant wedding. Something didn't feel right, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. For the first time in my life, I felt like a real daughter to my parents. Every time Mom called about wedding details or Dad asked about venue options, I allowed myself to believe that things were finally changing. Maybe Grandma's interventions over the years had finally gotten through to them. Maybe they'd realized how unfairly they'd treated me all this time. The wedding day itself was everything I could have dreamed of. The venue was this beautiful lakeside resort with a ceremony set right by the water. The flowers were perfect, the food was amazing, and everyone seemed to be having a wonderful time. Even my parents appeared genuinely happy, mingling with guests and beaming with what looked like real pride. Grandma pulled me aside during the reception, her eyes sparkling. "This is exactly what you deserve, sweetheart," she said, hugging me tight. I'm so glad your parents finally did right by you." She then went to thank my parents personally for giving me such a beautiful wedding. James and I left for our honeymoon feeling like we were floating on air. We spent a blissful week in Hawaii, not thinking about anything except each other and our future together. Then came the email. I was still unpacking from the honeymoon when my phone pinged. The subject line was simple: wedding expenses. I opened it, expecting maybe a final tally of what my parents had spent, something to satisfy my curiosity. Instead, there was an itemized bill for $100,000 with a note from my mother. "We trust you'll handle this promptly. Payment details attached." I stared at my phone screen for what felt like hours, my hands shaking. This had to be a mistake. They couldn't possibly. "James," my voice cracked as I called him over. "You need to see this." He read the email, his face going from confusion to shock to anger. "They're billing you. After all their talk about wanting to give you the perfect wedding, this has to be a joke." But it wasn't a joke. The bill was real, and so was the expectation that we would pay it. We sat on our couch that evening, looking at our bank accounts, trying to make sense of it all. "We have the money," I finally said, my voice hollow. "The down payment we've been saving for the house." "We should talk to them first," James suggested. "Maybe there's been a misunderstanding." But I knew there hadn't been. This was classic mom and dad, building me up just to knock me down again. The only difference was that this time, they'd waited until after the wedding to do it. I wrote the check for $100,000 with shaking hands. Our entire house down payment gone in a single signature. But as I sealed the envelope, I felt something else besides the pain and betrayal, a kind of grim resolution. "I'm done," I told James as I dropped the envelope in the mailbox. "I'm done trying with them. I'm done hoping they'll change. I'm just done." "What about your grandmother?" he asked gently. "Should we tell her?" I shook my head. "I can't. She was so happy at the wedding. So proud of them for finally treating me right. I can't bear to tell her what they did." That night, I lay awake thinking about all the signs I'd ignored. The sudden generosity, the insistence on an expensive wedding, the way they'd brushed aside my modest budget. I'd wanted so badly to believe they changed that I'd walked right into their trap. Life was just starting to feel normal again when Patricia showed up at our door, unannounced, one Sunday afternoon. She stood there with her trademark bright smile and a fruitcake that nobody would want to eat. "Haley, darling," she trilled, pushing past me into our living room. "It's been ages." I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd pop by to see how married life is treating you. That was Aunt Patricia's way. She'd just pop by whenever she needed to refill her gossip reservoir. She was Dad's sister, the family's self-appointed information broker. If something happened in the family, Aunt Patricia would know about it before the people actually involved did. "Can I get you some coffee?" I offered, already knowing this wasn't going to be a quick visit. "Oh yes, dear, and then we can catch up properly." She settled onto our couch like she was preparing for a long interrogation session. "I haven't seen your parents in ages. How are they doing?" I busied myself with the coffee maker, trying to buy time. "I wouldn't know." "Wouldn't know?" Her voice went up an octave. "What do you mean, wouldn't know? They're your parents." "I don't talk to them anymore," I said simply, putting her coffee down. But why?" She leaned forward, eyes gleaming with the prospect of fresh gossip. "They gave you such a beautiful wedding. Everyone's still talking about it." "I'd rather not discuss it." 2 days later, my phone started buzzing with messages from relatives. That's when I saw it, Aunt Patricia's Facebook post. It breaks my heart to see how ungrateful some children can be these days. "Just visited my niece, who told me she's cut off contact with her parents. The same parents who just gave her a gorgeous wedding. No respect for family anymore. Parents sacrifice everything for their children, and this is how they're repaid. Ungrateful children. Heartbroken. Family values. The comments started rolling in immediately. Distant relatives I hadn't seen in years were suddenly experts on my life, calling me ungrateful, spoiled, and disrespectful. People who hadn't bothered to stay in touch were now tagging me in their responses, demanding explanations. But what really got me was my mother's comment. It's true what they say. You never really know your children. Some show gratitude and appreciation for everything their parents do for them, while others, well, you can certainly tell the difference between my eldest and youngest daughters. Disappointed mother. I sat staring at my phone for hours, reading and rereading my mother's comment. Each word felt like a knife twist, especially that comparison between Monica and me. Finally, something inside me snapped. Enough, I said out loud, startling James, who was working nearby. I'm done being the bad guy in their story. My hands were shaking as I opened my filing cabinet and pulled out the check, the one I'd written to my parents. I took a photo of it, making sure the amount was clearly visible. $100,000. Then I started typing. Since everyone seems to have an opinion about my relationship with my parents, let me tell you the real story. Yes, they threw me a beautiful wedding. No, I didn't ask for it. In fact, I had planned a modest celebration with a $25,000 budget that I was going to pay for myself. They insisted on making it bigger, saying they wanted to treat me just like Monica. 1 week after the wedding, they sent me this bill for $100,000, 4 times my original budget. Here's the check. I had to write them using every penny of our house down payment savings. That's why I don't talk to my parents anymore. I hit post before I could change my mind and attached the photo of the check. The response was immediate. The same relatives who'd been calling me ungrateful just hours before were now posting shocked responses. Aunt Patricia's original post filled up with new comments, many from people demanding she take it down. My phone rang around dinner time. It was Grandma Haley. Her voice was tight with emotion. Is it true what you posted about the wedding bill? I told her about Mom brushing aside my modest wedding plans, about their insistence on making everything bigger and more expensive, about the email with the bill that arrived right after our honeymoon, and about how James and I had to give up our house down payment to pay them back. The line was quiet for a long moment after I finished those miserable details. Grandma took a deep breath. Listen to me, Holly. You focus on taking care of yourself and James. I'll deal with your parents. Grandma, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I've watched them treat you like a second-class citizen your entire life. But this is a new low even for them. Her voice hardened. Don't worry about them anymore. I'll handle it. I blocked my parents on every platform I could think of, including social media, email, and the phone, for the next hour after we hung up. I had had enough of their manipulation, their games, and my hope that they would change. Someone began beating on our front door while I was preparing dinner, a week after I shared it on social media. I was alone myself because James was working late. My mother was standing there, her face flushed with rage, when I opened it. She pushed past me into the house and yelled, "How dare you? How dare you go running to your grandmother with your lies?" I maintained my composure in my voice. I didn't tell any lies. I paid the bill you sent me, and when you tried to discredit me, I told the truth to everyone. You've ruined everything. She was now on the verge of losing her mind. You caused your grandmother to amend her will. Are you aware of what you've done? I was unaware of that. What are you talking about? She's leaving almost everything to you." Mom's voice broke. "Everything, the house, her savings. It's all your fault that Monica receives a few meager sums while your father and I receive nothing." As my mother went on with her fury, I stood there, taking in this knowledge. She yelled, we had it all planned out. It was okay because we planned to utilize the bequest to pay off the second mortgage we took out for Monica's wedding. Everything was meant to be divided equally by your granny. All of the parts suddenly came together. I murmured softly, "That's why you insisted on paying for my wedding. You thought you'd get the money back from Grandma's inheritance anyway." That is, of course, the reason. Look at what you've done now, though. You've betrayed your granny, and we're drowning in debt. Her annoyance only increased when I couldn't resist laughing. "So I just gave you $100,000 for my wedding. That need to assist you with your debt." Mom's face darkened in color. That money was already spent by us. That's not the purpose, though. This has to be fixed. Tell your grandmother that it was a huge misunderstanding and that we have reconciled. No. What do you mean, no? You owe us this. A sense of peace descended upon me. I owe you nothing at this time. Your money troubles are just that, yours. I won't lie to Grandma to get you money that you didn't deserve in the first place. You ungrateful little. I went to the door, opened it, and motioned for her to go without saying anything else. I just shoved her out of the apartment, locked the door, closed it in her face, and left when she didn't move. Before giving up, she screamed and banged on the door for 10 more minutes. After that, Monica called. She insisted, "How could you do this to them? They gave you everything, just like they gave me, and this is how you repay them." "Monica, I didn't receive anything from them. I received a bill from them. Your parents are them. They have given up so much for us." No, she was told. They gave up something for you. I served as their retirement fund's contingency plan. Before hanging up, she labeled me callous and rude, and I lost my sister as well. But what do you know? That's fine with me. Grandma still visits me frequently. We speak on the phone nearly every day, and she joins us for supper every Sunday. When people ask me if I miss my family, I honestly tell them that I don't miss the family that was there, but I do miss the family I wish I had. I've discovered that even when such relationships involve your own parents, sometimes the boldest thing you can do is to end them.